Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hey, Royce?
Hello?
Hi.
Wait a minute, is this Kim?
Yeah.
Kim, I don't know how to tell you this, but we are live on the air. I just started the show when you just popped up and I wasn't able to reach you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, so everybody out there in radio land listening that thinks this starting sounds a little bit strange, something strange has happened technically. It could be paranormal related for all we know. But
strangeness seems to follow us.
At any rate, I tried to call them twice. I didn't get an answer. So I started the show to tell you I was having trouble connecting. And as my show connected, I could hear them talking. So I don't know how that happened. But as long as it has happened, why don't we go ahead and start the show?
It's a miracle.
I take it that male voice I'm hearing would be Chris.
That's me. Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. And Chris, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've talked to Kim a few times. It's the first time I think I've contacted you. And I believe your name is pronounced Chris Matheny or Matt Heaney?
It's
Matheny. And then Kimberly, yours is a little bit more difficult. It's can you pronounce that?
It's actually easier to say than to spell. It's roulette, like Russian roulette with the B in front of it. So.
Okay, so it's Kimberly Brulette.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a French name. It's got all these extra vowels. So.
Yeah, mine's French too. Mine's actually pronounced matinee, but they actually haven't said it that way in a long, long time.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. Well, listen, I just met y'all recently on Facebook, as you're pretty well aware. So, I'm not really greatly familiar with you. I wish I'd had time to read some of your articles on your website, but due to the fact I was putting my website back up after a spam attack, between that and the holiday, I didn't have time to. So I'm going to kind of count on you guys to fill in some of the gaps here. Now, we're going to be talking today about what lies beyond once we pass on. And am I to assume this is going to lead into talking about ghosts, orbs, hauntings, and etc.?
It usually does.
Well, yeah, actually, we deal with paranormal on a regular basis, even outside of investigations. What Lies Beyond is kind of like a culmination of all the experiences that we've had, and finally just saying, well, we're going to be out there and help people and enable them to know a little bit more about the paranormal. And we do actually research theories with regard to, things related to that genre. So. Okay.
So you guys have, are y'all still doing active paranormal investigations today?
Yes.
Yes, we definitely are.
Are y'all limited to a certain area?
Well, it depends. I mean, if we plan it, we can sometimes go a little further. We went to the Stanley.
Yeah, okay. Well, we live near Charlotte, North Carolina, so we stay pretty much based in the southeast. But we have made arrangements to go as far as Ohio and Colorado.
Colorado, it's kind of a hike from Carolina, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we had a unique opportunity to be among the last investigators allowed into the Stanley, as far as we know to this point.
We were at the very last paranormal conference there as we were guest speakers along with a bunch of another panel of people that were there. Well, and we had a great time.
I need to deconfuse myself on this because I always get these two motels mixed up. There's the either Stanley or Shanley Hotel that the guy got the movie The Shining from, and then there's the Stanley or Shanley Hotel that's run by Salvador. Which one is this that y'all are...
Well, the Stanley was the one in Colorado that Stephen King stayed in and got the inspiration for the movie The Shining. And then there is also another one called the Shanley.
But that's up northeast. That's Massachusetts.
Well, I understand it's a pretty haunted location as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's, I can't remember the exact location of it, but, it's up in the northeast.
It's up northeast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know that I talked to, Salvador when he was on my show about it a few years ago, and he told me where it was at, but to be honest with you, I've done a bunch of shows since then, and I don't remember exactly, but have you guys ever had a chance to get to his motel?
No, not that one. We have had some invitations up to go up to the Rhode Island area and Massachusetts and several places in Pennsylvania. We just haven't been able to, work out that in our schedule. We're also planning on at some point going down to some in Savannah and Charleston as well. So.
Well, if you guys ever do get the opportunity, I would give it a big plus mark to try and stop in if you're able to. I hear that it's a very, very active hotel up there.
Yeah, it's on the list. I do believe we're going to be going to Kentucky soon.
Yeah, we're going to Morrison Lodge in April. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And looking forward to that. We've been friends with JC on Facebook for a couple years now and been wanting to get up there. So finally getting a good opportunity.
JC?
Yeah, with the Morrison Lodge.
Okay.
Up in Elizabethtown, Kentucky.
Okay, I got you. So, you guys got a pretty active itinerary going on. And before we go too much further, usually one of the first things I try to do is mention my guest's website. But as you know, we got started out on a little bit of an unusual foot. Mm-hmm. So to mention to everybody before I forget, because I will if you don't watch me.
Sure.
It's www.whatliesbeyondforyou.blogspot.com. And they've got a lot of articles there. And I'm not sure, do you guys have videos there? And I know you have a contact form and information about yourselves, but what else do you have there?
Well, we also have a YouTube channel, What Lies Beyond.
Yeah, we have links to the YouTube.
Okay.
We have our YouTube channel is What Lies Beyond, the number 4, the letter U. And a lot of links to those are also on our blog as well. We do have an episode of What Lies Beyond on there. We are in the process of finishing up several episodes. We had it recently moved into our home, and that has kind of thrown us off our tracks for a few months, but we're starting to get back on track now.
Yes, because not only are we paranormal investigators, we are a family. So that it's full-time investigators and full-time employment and family and all that. So, but as far as to who we are, I grew up in a haunted house that was finished in 1903, and that's how I got interested in this, is because I became kind of haunted by certain spirits that were always there, and it prompted me to, at an early age, but it got really bad, and I actually attempted suicide when I was 10. But from that point out, I decided not to be a victim anymore, and that I would try to learn as much as I could about it. And decades later, I met Kim, and the paranormal had become more mainstream and not quite as frowned upon as when I first got into it. And so we founded the group, the Research Institute of the Paranormal. Mm-hmm. And we've just been trying to help as many people as we can since. We kind of specialize in children and in families that have children in need. Because, that's what I went through for years, was being tortured as a child. So,
Did that affect your school grades coming up?
Actually, yes, it did. It affected every aspect of my life. I couldn't sleep at night. I can actually remember when it started. There were curtains hanging in my room, and they cast shadows on the ceiling that looked like Fred and Barney from the cartoon. And then one night they started talking. But I could never understand what they were saying, and there were voices began to just come through the room, and objects would move, and like the closet would unpack itself. It was, and I got horrible grades, and things just went south quick.
Well, I can imagine they did. I mean, it's between not getting enough rest and having that place so heavy on your mind during the day, it was probably very hard to focus.
Yeah, well, also there was the issue of doubting myself, because I went for a long time wondering, should I say this to anybody or am I going to wind up in a padded room? And I just kept it to myself for the longest time until I finally cracked, and I tried to do myself in a couple different ways. And my mom actually found me and when I was 10 years old, and I wound up getting some counseling, and that was when I decided, I don't have to be a victim. And basically what had been going on had never actually attempted to hurt me that I knew of. So I just...
But being a kid, you didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah. And also, this was in a time period before the internet, and we're right in the smack dab in the middle of the Bible Belt, so
am I.
Yeah. So, that was something totally taboo, didn't talk about that, makes, you wonder if people think you're nuts and stuff like that. So, there's even today some people, have that opinion, and we realized that there was kids out there that were needing some help because they didn't know who to turn to necessarily. So, it's good. I felt like it was good for them to have somebody that had been through it that could relate to them and that they could relate to, and at least have somebody to listen to what they have to say.
Right. And, not all the time is it paranormal.
Right.
A lot of times it is, a cry for help for something else. But in this situation, there is no downside to listening to them. Sometimes it's just a little belief and support will help them, come to grips with whatever it is and move through. And if it is still a paranormal issue, then, you continue to look for the correct professional help, because not every group you run into is going to be the right group for you.
That's true. So, when kids at school did find out about the ghosts, did it cause, like fights or you to get teased or anything like that?
Actually, no one in school ever found out. It was actually not until I went into the Army when I was 18, because this was something that predominantly happened at home. And when I went into the Army, one of the spirits traveled with me. And it wasn't long when I was stationed at Fort Riley for a little while. And when I got there, it wasn't long before I lost every roommate, because they kept telling, the sergeant stories about going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. There was some tall, dark figure standing over my bed, and they didn't want to be in that room anymore. So I did wind up in my own room.
So, you actually had people that would see the ghosts while you were asleep?
Yes.
Oh, well, who would that be more terrifying for, you or them?
It was always them, because by then I had come to grips with it, and he didn't bother me.
So you would say this spirit was probably more attached to you than any house you'd been in? Yeah,
I would think so. We've been told before that he was a spirit guide. See, what happened when I tried to kill myself when I was 10, I used to never talk about this, but in my blog stories, Kim has a series of blogs and I have a series. I actually wrote about the instances when I tried to take my own life, because I just either thought I was insane or just didn't want to live with this for the rest of my life. And after that, this one spirit showed up and kind of did away with the others. They just kind of faded away into the background, and he was the only one I really had left to contend with. And since then, there have been a few psychics that told me that this is my spirit guide.
So as long as he's with you, you don't have the activity anymore.
He's kind of a transient. You don't always, it's not that he's always here. I don't know how he works. I really wish I did.
Well,
it's one of the reasons I'm asking.
I think he knows when we need him. For instance, there was a time period when we were in the apartment. We just recently moved, but before we moved from the apartment, there were several instances. We had a malevolent spirit that tried to come into our lives and was trying to wreak havoc, especially in our bedroom and our closet. I mean, there would be a week where 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that, where we would hear things, boxes being thrown. We'd hear stuff in the middle of the night. We totally nixed the fact it was a vermin of any sort, wasn't a mouse or anything. We had boxes that were huge that would be knocked off the shelf. We'd have
it's my closet unpacker.
Clothes hangers slide back and forth, things like that, and a lot of noise. And we'd hear footsteps go through our bedroom. And so then about a week or two later, I was actually sitting on the edge of the bed, and there was this horrific growl. And it was like, lack of better term, it was kind of like a demonic growl. And it was right over my right shoulder, and I was looking at Chris, who was about 3 feet away, and he heard it from where he was at. And I was like deer in the headlights, as soon as I heard it. And totally still, I felt the vibration of the sound on my neck, and I felt it in my ears. It was probably the scariest growl I've ever heard. But then it repeated itself, and then I jumped up and, grabbed Chris right away.
Now, I tell people it was so distinct that I could actually place where it was in the air. It was, it's just one of those moments like, oh my God, did that just happen? Mm-hmm. And then it repeated itself. And I actually can do an impression of the growl that it made. It sounded like this.
Wow.
It did it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like my son Josh. He used to like to do that. I called it an evil growl and forbid him to do it.
But, it was just very, very scary. And so that happened. And then about another week later, we were laying in bed, getting ready to sleep. I had my foot just barely off the edge of the bed because I was too hot, too cold thing. And all of a sudden something grabbed my leg and started pulling on my right calf. Well, I yelled for Chris and it got him, up, and he started pulling me back on the bed. So, from his perspective, he was sitting there trying to...
Yeah, I hooked her under the armpits, and I pulled back with my weight because I saw her just start to shoot toward the foot of the bed. And my very first instinct was, okay, she's screwing with me. But I realized her arms were like up in the air, and there was no way she could be propelling herself. So I grabbed her under the arms because she had this like terrified look and pleading with me. And so I pulled, and she actually came up off the bed 3 to 5 inches and hung there for about 4 seconds. And she was our little rope in a tug of war. And her right leg, I think it was stuck straight out like a pole. And her left leg was kind of limp. So whatever it was just holding her by one ankle. Mm-hmm. And then it let go, and we both collapsed back into the headboard. And that was actually the first time I ever called on that spirit and asked him to come and make this other spirit leave and not return. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know if it was the spirit guide or if it was just our own energy, because I believe a lot of it is our own energy. But either way, it left and never came back that I know of.
Okay. Well, how do you think, and I'm not trying to get religious on you just because I live in the Bible Belt. In fact, I left religion behind in favor of alchemy and spirituality and that sort of thing. But, however, these are still questions I think it's always good to ask and get different opinions from different people on. How do you think the whole system works, where some people end up coming back as ghosts, yet some people go on and stay in heaven or wherever they're going to in the afterlife? How do you, don't you think everybody should go to the same area, or is it normal for them to be segregated out like that, or is it done by choice, or?
These are some of the questions that we do ask and are looking for the answers, and it's unfortunate we still don't have answers, but we have theories. And I think a lot of it has to do with personal energy. And I think that's also, for lack of a better name, been called karma. But I think that when everything is reduced to its base elements, everything is energy. Everything's made of energy. It can't be destroyed, only converted, and so on. And I think that when one is an evil person or done evil things and put evil vibes out into the world, you alter your own frequency and energy into a negative spectrum. And so when you do shed the mortal coil and you're just energy left, if you're a negative energy, how could you even approach a positive energy? You would be naturally repelled. So I think that negative energies are repelled from any kind of godly spirit or however people want to term it, but into the light, the positive. That's my personal opinion is it's the weight of your soul can keep you down if you have it charged with negative energy.
Well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, even science will tell you that matter and antimatter will destroy itself. It's the same principle if you ask me. But if you run hot water and cold water, they both cease to exist in favor of warm water.
Right.
Right.
And there was another point to make with that. When we have the spirits of children or people who were not negative or evil, these could have just been, because like we said, we don't know all the mechanisms and we don't know how much intelligence plays into this as well as science and what I like to call paraphysics. Because truly I think that we're going to discover there is a whole other realm of physics that does deal with spiritual energy and paranormal events. And I like calling it paraphysics. But I think that when we deal with spirits like that there is some other mechanism involved where they weren't necessarily negative energies that couldn't go on, but maybe there is another thing like unfinished business or an extreme being surrounded by negative energy, like they died in some horrible, sad way and it trapped them here because it forcibly changed their energy. Because it's not fair to say that every ghost is a negative entity. It's not. They aren't.
Mm-hmm.
How about the ones that are negative? Do you think that they can still go into the light and change their energy, or would they have to come back to Earth to do it?
I really wish I knew. Personal opinion is things are constant, but also they are ever changing, so it's really hard to label that one. Is a negative entity going to be negative forever? Well, we don't have to be in life. I haven't always been a good person. I have done things I'm not proud of, but I changed. I realized, from my heart that, sometimes that you have to make a change or you are doomed. So I made a change. So not all things are constant. Some people quit smoking. Some people quit drinking alcohol. So I don't know how that works in the afterlife. Can they make a change at this point, or is it too late?
Well, like I say, this change has to be made in the physical realm where you have inner reaction in order for it to count. In other words,
yeah.
And that's, I don't know if you have to pass beyond the veil to find out the answer to that or not, but it's an interesting question, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and something else is that, we also have theories about why some people are more sensitive to the spirits, as well. One of the things that we have found consistently among people we have talked to is that they've had near-death experiences, especially ones at childbirth. So Chris had one, and I know several other people that have had some. We talked to probably 100 people or more at least that have had similar type of experiences, and they are very sensitive to spiritual activity. So there's a lot of things that are involved that we don't totally understand, and the best we can think of is that it's kind of like putting a little pinprick, when somebody does have a near-death experience, that they have that pinprick that allows just a little bit to come back with them, maybe.
Someone that passes, I died at birth. I was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, and I actually died at birth, but they were able, obviously, to revive me. But we kind of think that maybe when someone does that, they go through the veil a bit, and then when they're revived and brought back, there's this little tiny conduit that still remains open, like touching pizza dough, and you lift your finger, or taffy, and there's a string still connected. And I just think that maybe I brought a little bit back with me, and that allowed spirits to kind of hone in on me. I'm no different than anyone else. I always tell people I'm not like that kid in the movies. I do not see dead people any easier than anyone else. But I have the same chances of seeing a spirit that everyone else when I go into a haunted location. But here's the crux. They seem to see me better. And whenever we do go into a location, or not even for an investigation. I mean, it's like when I was in the Army, when I got out and, met my son's mother and all this stuff, I wound up having to warn people. You come to stay with me or hang out with me for any length of time, you're going to see things that you can't explain. And they would laugh it off, but, to a man, all of my friends and relationships that I've had throughout my life have all come to see these things, and for a few of them it's been revelations where they now believe in the afterlife when before they didn't.
Even the church, and believe me, my dad was a preacher, and at one point I was even naive enough to be a Sunday school teacher. The church believes in the afterlife, but not in the sense of, being here walking amongst this realm with us unseen. I think it's common for a lot of people to believe that there is something after an afterlife, but I think what we're beginning to trouble at is how do we identify it, don't you think?
Yeah.
Well, I agree with you that there, a lot of the religious beliefs, and I actually have a master's in biblical studies, so I have a little bit of experience with this one, but basically, they want to believe on one hand, but then they want to deny it on the other. There's even scriptures after, this when Jesus was died on the cross that there was people, it says the spirits walked around, okay? So even the own Bible, talks about it, but people in the religious sectors have tended to shy away from that. And what I don't believe they realize is that there are things at work that we don't totally understand. We understand a fraction of what is out there, and we just don't tend to open ourselves up to what the possibilities are.
I used to work with a guy that he made the statement that he didn't believe in life after death, and I said, well, what do you believe in? He said, nothing. I said, so when we die, what happens? He said, absolutely nothing. You turn off like a light bulb and cease to exist forever. And I said, yeah, that sounds interesting, but too bad it's not true. And he said, well, how can you prove it's not? And I said, it's very easy to prove that that's not true. Close your eyes. Close your eyes and try to imagine absolutely nothing. You cannot do it because there is no such thing as nothing. Even when you have a jar of empty, it's full of atoms.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, science has recently found out that even in the vacuum of space, there is no empty vacuum of space, that there's energy in that.
Yes, absolutely. And even though it's the vacuum of space, there are still multitudes of random particles flying around through the entire thing. So there might be some empty space between them, but space is anything but empty. You cannot imagine nothing. I've tried to lay there and imagine not existing. You cannot do it. Your mind will not allow you to not think of something. I think the sleep is the closest you come to it. And I used to try to imagine the end of the universe. It's the same concept. You just can't do it. What's it do? Drop off in a box? Does it swirl around on itself?
And see, that energy, talking
energy
about,
is eternal.
It's, we actually have, theories that are based on that, with regard to, there seems to be things that help energy, help spiritual activity to be more active, and there's other things that hinder it. For instance, sea salt or, sage. There's a lot of different things that people have used over the years that either ward off or encourage spirits. Certain geological structures help encourage activity. So what we think is that some of the frequencies that the spiritual realm are at actually, help me out here, that basically they are...
Okay, if you imagine everything in the universe is made of atoms, and all atoms vibrate and pulse. That's how they stick together. They share electrons. And so everything on a subatomic level has a frequency, subatomic frequency. That's how we hold ourselves together. So when a person dies and their spirit leaves their body, they lose 99.9% of their mass. But energy does have mass. So when you lose all that, your frequency is altered. It may go like super fast and go beyond, normal perception. And we believe that they have to draw energy from the world around them, and that's where you get your cold spots and so on. They'll draw the energy and use that energy to alter their frequency so that they can now slow themselves down or speed up, however the case may be, to get back into a perceptible range. And in doing this, they go by the range that equipment can pick up. Your infrared cameras, thermal cameras, all that full spectrum. And then it gets into the animal range where cats and dogs can perceive them. You see the dog look at the corner when there's nothing there. That's because it's picking up something we can't perceive yet. And then the last thing is they finally use enough energy to get to where we can perceive them with our little weak senses. And, that they will often communicate or try to move an object if they can get enough energy together. But the energy, I think, is quickly dissipated because they just don't have that physical structure to contain it.
Right.
And so they use what they can while they can to get your attention or try to communicate, and it's all through frequencies and energy. And that's a theory we've been working on for a long time, and it actually plays into everything because she was talking about the rock salt. It's a crystalline structure, and it has its own frequency, just like quartz. They use quartz to run watches, and it can also be used to hold computer information. So when you have, these salt crystals that people have been using for thousands of years to protect themselves from negative energies, well, what if it's because these crystals emit a field that we cannot yet perceive or measure, but in the spirit realm, if you put a line of rock salt down, it creates a force barrier.
Yeah.
That something of a certain
like
type
a
of energy can't cross. And somehow someone noticed that. It took on a mythological proportion and has been used out of context in witchcraft and magic and paganism and spiritualism and Native American studies and so on down the line.
But it's based
it still
on
has
science.
a basis in science, and it still has a basis in mythology, and it still works and is relevant, but there are no true answers as to how it really does work.
Well, I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that there's different kinds of energies, and they don't always, they're not always compatible.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly what we were saying, is those salt crystals may repel spirit energy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
just like burning sage.
One of the things that we noticed about towards the beginning of this year, we had gotten a bunch of stuff out of storage, and up until that point, we had a spiritual activity almost every single day. I mean, it was off the chain all the time, and all of a sudden it just seemed to stop, and couldn't figure out why.
And it went on that way for months.
Yeah, and it went on for a long time, and then the only thing we could pinpoint it to was that there was a box of these huge quartz crystals that Chris had gotten out of storage, and we had put them all over the house. So,
now, to clarify, these crystals were special, though.
Right.
I had spent time going around to different, and I've done this for years and years because information is information regardless of where it comes from. And there's usually always something useful in anything that I discover. But I would go to voodoo shops and pagan shops and witchcraft shops and just on down the line, and library bookstores and all that. And I just derailed myself.
About the crystals.
The crystals. I searched all these shops, and over the years, I was actually looking for specific crystals because of the way the spirits had done me at night and how it was pretty destructive to me. So I was looking for crystals that people would either program for me or already had made crystals that were supposed to keep you safe from negative energies and spirit energy. So I have this big shoebox full of all these quartz crystals, and they're big ones. And I've amassed them over years, and I had forgotten that I had them. And I had brought them home from storage, and they had been sitting, I think, in a cabinet in the kitchen, right in the middle of the house. And I think that was why all the activity stopped, was because these crystals are supposed to prevent that type of activity.
I've heard similar before. I've also heard that you can use dowsing rods to locate spirits. In fact, a friend of mine, John Strobel, was recently at a haunted location with, I think it was Channel 11 News, and his dowsing rod started spinning, and one of the people at Channel 11 said, well, let me try it. Suppose it's just you that's really spinning them. And the guy from Channel 11 tried it, and they spun on him, too. And he's like, no, it ain't him. And these things are going off by themselves. Mm-hmm. So have you guys ever heard of these using dowsing rods?
Actually,
we've heard of. I mean, I haven't
We've heard a lot about it. We've seen it. We know about them. And I've actually been interested to try them. Actually, for the longest time, my look on them was just, I thought they were bogus. But I have come around to thinking that I don't know everything. And that a lot of things that I originally kind of discarded out of hand were actually worth taking another look at. And I include dowsing rods in that. I think there's something to it, and it needs to be examined further. I think it's an extension of your own personal energies and being able to interact with other energies. Mm-hmm. And that's how these guys are able to zone in on what they're looking for: oil, water, gold, spirits.
Well, we do know that they're metal, and metal attracts energy, so are good conductors of energy, should I say. Maybe there's a connection in that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I said, it's part of growing as an investigator and as an amateur researcher and scientist trying to figure this stuff out, is that the problem with science for the longest time has been just dismissing things out of hand and thinking there's no merit there just because one particular person doesn't understand it. Or
it's not worth the time to investigate because it's not real, and they can't really prove that it's not real, and they're not investigating to try to prove.
And they're doing themselves a great injustice and discredit by not looking further into it, and at least, having someone take a credible look into a lot of these things. Because a lot of the science community is not going to accept us, or me per se, because Kimberly does have letters after her name. But for a lot of us that are laymen that are doing this experiments and doing this legwork and all this effort to try to prove something we know is real. It's something science really hasn't encountered very often, It's like trying to prove water is there. It's here, we know it.
Well, and then there's also the theory, and recently I found out that it was somebody else that come up with it a long time ago, but we had come up with it on our own, is that the materials in buildings and such, they're porous and they absorb that energy. And we think that the reason why so many people have, a lot of spiritual activity happen during a remodeling or something like that is because that energy is being released.
It's interesting you should say that. I had, it was either Barry or Brad Klinge on my show. Huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're our friends.
Well, okay, I'm just saying, I forget which one it was. They were both going to come on, and then only one of them was able to make it. The other one had somewhere to go. They both their first names start with a B, and they're easy to confuse and forget which one is which.
Uh-huh.
But at any rate, the one that was on my show was telling me that, about what you're saying about the porous woods and that. And he said that a lot of times when you're picking up EVPs, it's this kind of energy that's in the woods and in the wood of the house or whatever, and this is why you have to make sure you get the EVP to answer a specific question.
Right.
And that's something I actually did love about the Klinge brothers and their show, which was not on near long enough. One of the only shows on that was actually doing real scientific work, and it didn't last, 2 seasons?
Yeah,
3 seasons?
1.5 seasons.
And then we have another group that they have made a stab at doing some real scientific work, but never really. Yeah. But then our guys, the Ghost Adventures crew, they really try. I've seen them do several intriguing and innovative things. So that was one thing we really liked about the Klinge brothers. You liked about their water.
Well, they did a thing. I remember the one that they did was at the Mississippi River and showed how the muddy water actually was more of a conductor of energy and electricity than clean water. And I thought that was actually kind of an interesting, experiment. And they actually proved that because the Mississippi River is so muddy, it actually acts as a conduit. But if it was clean water, if it was just a pond or not a pond, but like a fresh, water, pool or something like that, it's not going to do the same thing because that's clean water. So it makes a big difference. And I thought they actually proved it using electromagnetic waves. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, that was something that my hat was off to them because they were always trying to push the envelope and gather scientific data.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shame that a show with integrity like that didn't last.
Yeah, I think that it does too. I hear they still have reruns going on, what was that, Planet Earth or...
Yeah, I've seen some reruns on a few times, and I always try to catch them when I can. I really wish they would get another show.
Yeah, he made a post yesterday about that and said there's just no plans on that. It's not that simple, but they are still...
Well, it's not about having a TV show. It's about doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what their perspective is.
Kim and I do our web show, and we're happy with that. It was never about getting on a network and making oodles of money. Now, to get some money to further work is a different story. But, it's not about being ghost hunter celebrities. That's just the wrong answer, period.
So y'all ain't going to be planning on doing a TV show anytime soon?
We do our web show. If someone came to us with a good idea and a decent budget and gave us the integrity and the creative rights to do it properly, but the problem is if you don't find enough evidence, they want you to pump it up, and you wind up having groups that will false fake stuff just to make their network happy, make the producer happy. And in the end, that's just terrible, and it ruins you forever. On our web show, if we don't get any evidence, we say we didn't get anything.
Yeah.
And there's no one to answer to but our friends and the people that watch the show. That's who we answer to. There's no one has to tell us, we want you to say that it wasn't this, that it was demonic. Because I have yet to encounter a demon in an investigation, to my knowledge.
Well, we even went out...
Although Paranormal State did it pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we even went out to the Devil's Stomping Ground here in North Carolina, and we were like, well, there's, this circle that nothing grows in.
And in all fairness, it's been that way for over 200 years.
It's been a long time.
Well, it seems to me like a lot of these ghost shows you see on TV, I would say, in my opinion, the majority of them are geared more toward demonic than they are toward ghostly.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that those are actually two complete separate entities altogether. Demonic is something that in my opinion, is pretty rare to come across.
Yes, it is. It's not something that happens every single time you go into a...
If you are a paranormal investigator and you stumble across an actual demon and demonic possession... that's going to be something I believe is going to be out of the realm for most of us on the normal level. I think that, you're going to need some heavy hitters. I would call in Miss Lorraine Warren to deal with that.
Yeah, I've recently had a girl on, y'all might have heard of her, Andrea Perrin, who has that book out, House of Darkness, House of Light, and they're going to be doing a movie on it in the near future called The Conjuring, where she actually, like you, Chris, grew up in this house that was haunted and lived with this here activity going on for some 10-odd years. And Lorraine and Ed Warren went out there and investigated it, and they weren't able to really help her in her particular situation, but they said she had ghostly, poltergeist, demon, and just about everything you could imagine going on inside of that house.
Wow. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe in demons and that they're not out there and that they don't bother people. I'm just saying I think that they're a lot more rare than people make out.
Oh, I understood that. I mean, you were pretty clear that, it's not a catch-all. In other words, it's a...
Exactly. It's just too easy to say, it was demonic for ratings,
Well,
and...
I mean, even that spirit that growled over my shoulder, I don't believe it was demonic. I think it was a malevolent spirit. In fact, we did some research on the site, and there was a serial killer, they believed to be a serial killer that had killed his girlfriend and the child.
No, what it was there was a murder-suicide.
Yeah, murder-suicide.
They believed that he was a serial rapist and possibly a serial murderer, and he killed a woman and her daughter, and then himself when he thought the cops had him. Mm-hmm. So
we actually had experiences with a woman there.
And hold on really quick before we knew that that was what happened. We were noticing an older woman like a late 20s.
Late 20s, yeah.
Late 20s, early 30s spirit of a female, because she would laugh at us.
Yeah.
It was just, we were sitting on bed talking, and all of a sudden we would just hear her voice in the middle of the room, laughing. It was creepy.
It was weird.
And then there was this, what we thought was the spirit of a little girl that was actually in Kim's daughter's bedroom.
Yeah.
And I promise you, there were some times it creeped even me out. Because Kelsey would be in bed asleep, and I would actually hear, Kelsey had the double doors for her closet, and you would hear them just boom, 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 like they were being slammed, you know. And I would open her door and look in, and you could actually see the doors like vibrate a few times and then stop.
But then we would go back to sit down,
and it would start again.
And it would start again. And then there was also a stuffed animal
that kept
moving around, and we would actually kind of make a game out of it. We would all look at it before we'd leave, and we'd know we were the only ones that were going to be there, and we had this stuffed animal somewhere in the house, and we'd all look at it, and then we'd all leave, and we'd come back, and it'd either be turned around in a different room or on a piece of furniture where it wasn't before, or something, and it was just kind of like went on for a few weeks like that. So it was actually funny. But you know, as far as people, you're going back to that discussion about people, you know, spirits. I don't believe that all those spirits are negative spirits, and that's the tendency to. For a lot of religious views, think that it's automatically a demon or it's automatically this or that. And I can't believe, I know the difference that I feel when I'm sensing certain spirits versus other spirits. And I let that radar determine whether or not it's something I should be worried about or not. You know? And most of the time it's not like that. It's not something that I sit there and I'm scared to death. I just know it's there.
Well, I think you're right. I agree with you that churches, I mean, religion in general, they do have a tendency to, the only spirit there is the Holy Spirit or the devil and their demons, and, you know, there can't be no other, so that just automatically everything gets stereotyped, in other words, and that just blocks all forms of learning.
Exactly.
Yeah, a closed mind is a wasted mind.
I would tend to agree with you on that one, too. But I would like to go back to what you were saying about your TV show. Where can people catch that at?
Well, we mainly right now have it on our YouTube channel, but we also have it available on PEN as well. So you can go to our YouTube channel for the full episode at What Lies Beyond, the number 4, the letter U, which is our YouTube channel.
You know, and like we said before, we're not looking for a network show, but if one came around where we actually had the freedom to do it right and free from pressure to do things the wrong way, then it's definitely something we would entertain. But for now, we're pretty much happy putting webisodes on, going and doing great investigations with great teams all over great locations.
Mm-hmm.
And
we've met plenty of great people in the paranormal field.
And we try to get to as many of the paranormal events as we can so that we can meet all of our friends, because we don't think of ourselves as any kind of celebrities. We have friends, you know, not fans. Mm-hmm. We have friends.
Well, and then, you know, we get to, you know, we've been able to meet people like the Booth brothers, and they were actually, you know, willing to, gracious enough to be a part of our, panel that we had, a celebrity panel on our when we were at the Stanley. We did a discussion about the industry as a whole with regard to the entertainment field.
Yeah, it's going to be
a field and how they've affected each other.
Give them the name. It's going to be a special episode of What Lies Beyond, the Paranormal Roundtable.
Yeah, it's
the Paranormal Roundtable.
Yeah,
yes.
It should be coming out in the near future. Chris is.
I'm almost done with it. Actually, it's been difficult because we have so many projects going. It's a matter of I can work so many hours on this one and so many hours on that one.
Okay.
And then we had the move thrown.
And that move killed 2 months of my time.
Yeah. So
if they want to catch your show live, what time do you show it?
Well, we don't have a live show right now. Because of the time, ours is, you know, basically filmed and produced, but it's
by
about
2 people.
30-minute show.
All right. Well, So what's the name of your YouTube channel then? What Lies Beyond number 4 U?
Yes,
Yep,
exactly.
letter U.
Letter U. Did I say number U?
No, you said number 4 and then U, but it's
Okay.
number 4, letter U.
All right. I just thought I went crazy for a second.
Oh, no.
I've been there. It's nice.
Actually, it happens to me quite frequently in my old age.
But yeah, they can get that, and we have some other evidence videos in there
Yeah,
as well.
we do. We have a lot of teaser trailers and evidence collections on there.
But we are working on producing some more videos, and we do apologize to everyone that it's taken us so long, but we are working on them. We don't want to do anything half.
And people don't really understand what goes into that, but Kim does graphic designs and so on. And she put a couple hundred hours into doing the graphics for the opening and ending credits. And then we together had to sit there and review evidence. I mean, you're talking hundreds of hours of evidence that we have to comb through, clean up. Then we have to go through footage and edit it together and say, okay, well, what would make an interesting and truthful show? And it literally takes hundreds upon hundreds, if not over 1,000 hours.
Well,
to
I
compile
think it took us about 2,000
The first
hours.
episode was 2,500 hours to get it together, but there's some of that doesn't have to be repeated because the graphics are done.
Right.
So, but it literally can take over 1,000 hours to put one of these shows together. So we don't have a crew of people. We do all the review, all the cleanup, all the editing, everything. It's just the two of us.
Oh, I can understand where you're coming from on that. Believe me, I run a one-man radio show over here. I go looking for the guests. I check out their website, their books, their, material, whatever. I post it to my site. I run my website. I promote their show. I turn around and turn the show into a video, and then I archive it all over the place. And, it can add up to a lot of time consumption.
Definitely.
Yes. Now, we do have some other members on our team. But it's kind of like when you look at the TV shows, let's say the Ghost Hunters. Okay, those investigators go investigate, but they don't help put the show together. You follow? They might do evidence review, but they don't help make the episode you're going to see on TV. So that's where we're at. We have other investigators, but we don't really utilize them to assemble our web show. So that's where I didn't want to offend our investigators by saying that they didn't do anything. But when it comes to putting the show together, then it is a little bit of a different story.
More involved.
We have great investigators. Beth Fontaine, Charlotte Parks. We have a couple others out there that are.
And then we have a junior investigator as well. My daughter, Kelsey. So.
Yeah, I was about to just say that. Doesn't your daughter play a role?
Yes.
Yes, she does.
Yeah, and actually, and there's been several cases now. We won't take her in a place that we feel like she's in any sort of danger.
Any real danger.
Yeah, any real danger. We won't. I won't take her to a heavily demonic, known demonic location.
Like Bobby Mackey's.
Yeah.
Kim does not want. Kelsey wants to go to Bobby Mackey's so bad it's killing her, and Kim does not want her to go.
I don't think I've ever heard of Bobby Mackey.
Bobby Mackey's Music World?
No, I haven't. Well, I have now.
Okay, well, you should.
Ghost Adventures have done like 3 episodes there,
yeah,
2 or 3.
And then
there's supposed to be a portal. They say a portal to hell in the basement, but I would just say a portal to a negative place.
Yeah, that may be why I haven't heard of it. I don't get to watch a lot of TV. I'm so busy, working on my show and reading books for my show and, stuff like that, that I do good to get about 3 hours TV in with my wife at night, and it's usually, nostalgic sitcoms like, Petticoat Junction.
Oh man. Well, we have our satellite program to record all of our paranormal shows. And we'll sit and do our editing and stuff while we're watching the Ghost Hunters or the Ghost Adventurers or the Most Haunted, all that stuff. So we actually try to work while we're watching.
That was an interesting thing.
We have to keep abreast of our friends in the field.
Yeah, I got a lot of friends out there, so I know how you feel. I've been online, had my own website since 2003 and been in groups and Facebook meetings and, well, you can imagine you meet a lot of people doing that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we've just been officially doing this for about 2 years now, and,
privately for ourselves.
Yeah, we have been doing it, but we've just been doing it together in this capacity for about 2 years, and in that time period we met, thousands of people.
Oh, and there was something I wanted to clear up about our show. Our show is for historic locations only. We don't, as a group, we do home investigations, to help people, obviously. But we do not shoot episodes of the show for that,
Right.
Because we feel, well, first, it's a privacy issue. Some families might not want you to do that but the problem comes in when people do want you to do that. And they want you to do it so bad that they're willing to puff up the stories and make it seem like more than it really was, and even go as far as to fake evidence. So we thought that if we just removed even the remotest possibility that it's going to wind up on our web show, then we'll get just a little more serious-minded people who really need help. And our show is basically based on what we thought were interesting historic locations and unknown locations.
Okay. Well, also, the first time I went to your website, the one thing that stuck out to me was right on the front page, there's a picture of you and her and a lady standing by a stage with some, looks like band equipment and stuff up there.
That was the Stanley Hotel.
Yeah, that was
Exactly.
at the Stanley. Yeah.
And y'all were being given an award called the Best Paranormal Couple Award. Want to tell us a little something about it?
I'll let Kim field that one.
Well, just, when we went to the Stanley, we had our award ceremony, and we were chosen for Haunted Entertainment's Best Paranormal Couple. So I thought that was a neat honor.
There are a few paranormal families out there that investigate. You have the Gallows that live near us. Mm-hmm. They're in, South Carolina?
Yeah.
And we were with Haunted Entertainment at the time, and they were having a big award show at the Stanley for their Frontier Paracon. And we were selected to be the Paranormal Couple of the Year.
Mm-hmm. And while we were there, one of the couples got married. We thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's interesting that y'all were a part of Paracon. That's something that goes down every year, and they usually have, some big-name people down there that are speakers for that event.
Well, this
was the Frontier Paracon, and there were actually some big speakers there, too.
Yeah, we had the Booth brothers there. We had...
and Natalie Poole was there. There were a bunch of people from... Chris from Ghost Hunters Academy.
Yeah, Christopher Lane, and, there was a bunch of people out there.
Rosalind Bound, Natalie Poole, Chris Mager.
We got to meet a lot of people we
had
known on Facebook, but had never really met, and so it was really neat. But we already were friends with the Booth brothers, so that was kind of neat seeing them again.
Yeah. So, have y'all had a chance to meet John Zaplis?
We're friends with him on Facebook, but we haven't got to meet him in person yet.
No. Though he did follow us on Twitter.
Yes, he's following us on Twitter. That's nice.
We thought that was kind of cool.
Now, if I got my information correct, John used to do some work with the Warrens.
Yeah.
Yes,
he did. I actually saw a documentary about an investigation he did with them. And that's actually the one that went on to become the movie, I believe, Haunting in Connecticut.
Yeah, it is.
That was the one where John said that was some of the scariest stuff he'd ever seen.
Uh-huh.
Actually, me and my wife went to see that right here in Houston, Texas. And I heard it was based on a true story, but I thought, well, don't they just say that about a lot of movies?
Yeah.
Well, I've seen, 3 or 4 different documentaries and specials on that event about the son that had cancer, and they moved so they could be closer to his treatment, and they wound up moving into a mortuary, a house that was used as a mortuary. And the 2 boys were set up in a basement apartment, which was where they did all the embalming and body storage. And I think the claim was that the oldest son became possessed or oppressed. And there was just all kinds of madness going on. And when the Warrens were there and Zaffis was there, I believe they said that the cousin got picked up and slammed against the wall and held there for a number of seconds. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I'd have wanted to be there for that or not.
I don't think it would have been what I would have chosen to do for dinner that day.
Yeah.
it sounded very, very similar to a lot of the Amityville stuff, and we have talked to Christopher Lutz a number of times as well, and he said that a lot of the movie is not necessarily completely true, not the way it did it, but it was similar in the fact that the stepfather was downstairs, and was being tormented by spirits as well,
Well, maybe that's why they say that it's based on a true story, because the story of the movie itself ain't true, but it's being told about something that was true.
Well, that it happens all too often in Hollywood. Let's look at one of the greatest horror films of all time, The Exorcist. Okay? That didn't happen to a girl. It was a little boy. The true story happened to a boy. And if you want to know about the true story, then you just need to go and pick up that movie that the Booth brothers made.
Yeah. The Haunted Boy, wasn't it?
The Haunted Boy.
That's interesting. I never knew that. And I
saw
The Exorcist.
Yeah, they did a documentary. They actually went to the actual, I think they were in the actual bedroom where the exorcism happened. They talked with some of the participants that are still around. If anyone wants to know the truth behind a lot of this stuff, sometimes you got to dig a little deeper. But I always recommend going to the Booth Brothers stuff. These guys are phenomenal documentary makers.
Yeah.
Their stuff is heartfelt. It's not for sensationalism. If you want to know, and they're not even necessarily paranormal investigators. They make documentaries, but these guys have the best heart and soul for the paranormal world. We learned so much from them just the first time we met them. There's always that issue about provoking spirits, and there may be a time where it's appropriate. I don't know, but I tried it a couple times, and I heard something from, actually it was Philip Adrian Booth, where he was talking about these spirits, that they might have had a hard life, they died under horrible conditions, they're trapped on this world, and they can't move on. Why would they even want to talk to us if we go in there yelling and cursing and being boisterous? And then sometimes you might actually stir up the wrong entity with that kind of activity.
Exactly. You don't want that spirit going up against you.
But you don't have to tell me twice. I'm on the page with you.
Yeah.
One of the things I did want to repeat again was that the website is www.whatliesbeyond4blogspot.com. If you want to learn a little bit more. And I wanted to mention to you two that we've been at this for about an hour and 3 minutes, and I thought maybe it'd be nice to ask you if you'd like to take a break.
Sure thing.
That'd be fine.
All right. Well, I tell you what, I got a little break time music I play. I haven't started putting ads in my show, at least not yet. That goes for about 3 minutes and 39 seconds. Why don't we play that, and we'll come back to the show after it's done.
No problem.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everybody. We're now back live on the air once more to continue with the show from where we left off at, as much as we can kind of try to remember, since I didn't nap that time, but still I had a moment to get distracted. But I believe we were just talking about the Booth brothers and their documentary they did. And I thought I'd ask you two, are there any other documentaries you're familiar with from the Booth brothers?
Let's see, there's Children of the Grave, 1 and 2, Death Tunnel. That was the one they did about Waverly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So not all of their work has actually hit the big screen then, has it?
Well, they send it to film festivals and stuff. Now, a lot of their shows are actually on Spook TV.
And Chiller.
Chiller, yeah.
Well, I know Exorcist, that made the big screen.
Well, no, they did one called The Haunted Boy, the true story of the
Exorcist.
Okay. There's just more documentaries.
Okay.
But they're well done, very professional. They have won awards for their work, and I think that they deserve a lot of credit for what they've done for the industry.
And we don't want to forget him. They have a partner that is their chief investigator, and he is the rock and roll ghost hunter, Keith Age.
Huh.
Keith Age, I don't think I've heard of him before.
Oh, wow, man. He's been in the field for a while. He
also gets in the Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm into Bigfoot, too.
Yeah, that's interesting you should say that, Chris, because I was just fixing to ask if you guys had an interest in anything other than the ghostly end of the paranormal, like UFOs, Bigfoots, or ancient astronaut theories, or any of that.
Yeah, we love the ancient astronaut stuff. Some of it's a little hard to swallow and a little out there, but a lot of it makes really good sense. And it's actually stuff that I've thought about since I was a little kid, especially because when I started going into the paranormal, I had my mom take me to the library all the time. She'd just leave me there. And I did a lot of research on mythology. It's one of my favorite subjects. And I saw these parallels between the different gods. And then basically it's the same god with a different name doing all these jobs. And when I saw the ancient alien stuff talking about that, it was pretty cool.
Oh, I imagine it was. And there's plenty of researchers out there who I would say are excellent, like the Booth brothers are in the ghost industry, so to speak. People like Philip Coppens, I think, is a good source of material. Nick Redfern. He don't necessarily, I would say, specialize in ancient aliens as far as he hasn't yet wrote a book that just focused on it. However, he's been on my show 6 or 7 times, and, we've touched on it enough that I can tell he's definitely studied it, in other words. You got some serious researchers out there. There's also Paul Van Ward, and he's really serious into it. And I'm like you, Chris. I think it's a fascinating subject because, I think if you get involved in the ancient alien theory, you'll begin to see how religion formed, and the part about the end times coming up. That's all the big talk about the church. I think it gives you a whole bigger picture than what the church does by itself, in other words.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. I've looked into it for many years. Over 20 I know of.
Yeah.
I've also got a bunch of books on that subject around here.
Yeah, when I was a kid and I first got into the paranormal, I was interested in all things, as I would later find out was cryptozoological, but I called it all things unusual. And I studied, my favorites were the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. I have now resigned myself to the Loch Ness Monster is not real. I don't believe in it. That one, I think, is not what it's supposed to be. But Bigfoot, on the other hand, I tend to think that where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, I've talked about that before because you got wrestlers like the Great Khali, who stands 7'2", and Big Show, I think, 7 foot tall. Big Show's some 400 plus pounds. If either one of these two wrestlers was all hairy and uneducated, it seemed like you'd have a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I always like to go back to the Pine Bluff sighting, and when we talk about Bigfoot, and that first sighting, was, you know, God, I'm trying to think of the names. Gimlin, the Patterson-Gimlin film. You know, I watched Dr. Jeff Meldrum on TV a bunch, but my favorite was when they actually broke it down frame by frame and they centered it, and you can actually see when it turns, and you can see the facial gestures where it's baring its teeth, how when it turned, it's, you know, a man in a suit, you know, it has a neck, and when we turn our head, we just turn our head. But that creature turned its whole upper torso because, like a gorilla, it didn't have a neck. You know, the chin sat below the shoulders. So the whole upper torso had to turn. Plus, when they looked at the footage of the footprints walking, there was a kind of a discrepancy in the stride. And when you watch the footage, if you watch the right leg of the creature lift up, there's some kind of huge bulge underneath the thigh muscle, as if it's been a damaged leg. Now, people say, okay, a man in a suit. Well, I'm sorry, but when the Patterson-Gimlin footage was shot, Planet of the Apes was being filmed, and that was the best they could do for an ape costume.
Mm-hmm. Plus, this was a female.
And it had breasts. They didn't make female gorilla suits.
And then you could also see the actual leg muscles move. And,
the buttocks muscle.
You could actually see them shake and move like they should have. And it just was not something that would have been if they were in a suit. So
Right.
And, you know, when I start to think that maybe Bigfoot's not real, I go back and I watch the Patterson-Gimlin film, and I'm blown away.
Well, tell about the thing with the footprints and stuff. I think that's just fascinating.
With the dermal ridges?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's easy to pick the fake Bigfoot prints from the real ones. And Esteban Sarmiento, actually, he's a primatologist. He's demonstrated this before about how people can fake them, where you get a mold of your foot and you use, I think it was acetone to cause it to enlarge and swell the mold up so you can make fake tracks. But the problem with that is all the dermal ridges and everything get blown up with it so that they look like crevices. When there was a fingerprint analyst for the FBI. He also does dermal ridges, period. And he took actual casts and photographs of casts and put them under microscopes and is able to find the dermal ridges in the skin that made the print. You can't do that with a carved wooden foot unless you are a master carver and spent 1,000 hours carving that thing.
Well, also there's a difference in how those dermal ridges...
Yeah, the dermal ridges on a human foot run in one direction, and on a gorilla they run lengthwise. And on a human, I believe it's crossways.
Yeah.
But on the Bigfoot, they ran across and up and down. So it was like a mix of the two patterns of dermal ridges.
This way.
So ours go up and down, and the apes go across. But he started finding on these casts that the ridges went both across and up and down. And you could even see where there were pebbles that were indented into the skin, and it was causing a dimple in the skin in the plaster cast.
Well, that sounds painful.
Yeah, but you can't fake that with a wooden footprint.
Right.
If you're using a wooden footprint and you step on a rock, it's going to crush the rock down. It's not going to put a dimple into the wooden foot that's making the cast. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the way it was, the rock was there, you could see how it created a little pucker dimple in the impression.
Yes,
so,
it is sideways. Yeah, it is sideways. Sorry.
So,
well, have you guys ever read the book by Jeff Hilling on the Patterson Bigfoot film?
No.
He covered a lot of the material you're covering, I think, and then some, because he says that there is no way that film could be a hoax, that he's reviewed it way too many times, and he went into great detail on this particular film in his book. So I thought, since you had an interest in that perhaps I'd like to hook up with him.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
You know, and we do live in North Carolina, and there's, you know, people get the wrong idea about Bigfoot. If they would watch Finding Bigfoot, I know some of that show is a little funny, but Yeah, I like when they say that there's a squatch in these woods. I always die laughing when they say we're going squatching. It kills me. But there's actually some science there, you know. They're serious about what they're doing, and I love their show and I watch it. And you find out that there are Bigfoot reported sightings all over the country. And you know, like New York City. People think about New York, they think that New York is this massive city. But in actuality, New York State is nothing but mountains and woods. The city is a tiny little part of it. And it was just the same thing with Rhode Island. Rhode Island was this, you know, huge areas of wild, you know, vast wilderness and stuff. And Bigfoot could be anywhere. How many people get up off their lazy boy, get in a Suburban, and go out to the woods and spend the entire weekend walking around looking for Bigfoot? Not many. They got soccer games, baseball, basketball, cut the lawn, go get groceries and shopping. There's less than 0.1% of people out there looking for these anomalies, these creatures on a professional level where they actually, you know, have some chance of finding it.
Right.
So
I know a guy that lives not too far from me named Tommy that he actually goes out and looks for them, or at least he used to. But like you say, it's a rare breed. Most people, they want to just study stuff on the internet and then write a book about it.
And call themselves an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one thing you always have to remember, everybody. Experts know more than you do. Well, he says with a sarcastic smile. But no, we found out, you know, that here in North Carolina, we have the Great Uwharrie Forest. I know a lot of people don't really know about it, but we have vast wilderness here as well. And there is...
we have the mountains, too.
Yeah, but in the Uwharrie Forest, there are documented sightings. And as a matter of fact, the Finding Bigfoot actually did a show on the Uwharrie Forest.
Not too far away from where we're...
well, as a matter of fact, they held their town hall meeting in the same town where we investigated the first episode of our show, Troy, North Carolina.
Well, you know, I was in North Carolina, or was it South Carolina? Whichever one. I took my basic baker's course in for the Marine Corps. I think Parris Island was one place, but I think the one I was in was the one that was not Parris Island.
Cherry Point?
Might have been Cherry Point.
Yeah, that's North Carolina.
That's where y'all are at.
Yep,
okay, I can tell you about 25 years ago, they had a putt-putt golf course with a big drive-in theater right next door to it that you could sit there and watch the movie at the drive-in while you were playing putt-putt.
2 for 1 special.
There you go. But I never forgot that place. As a matter of fact, I kind of miss it.
Yeah. Well, you know, we also have the Great Dismal Swamp, and it's a massive swamp where the Marines do a lot of training. But, you know, I just encourage people that when they think that these things aren't real, that there's really, you know, they couldn't be anywhere around here, people are used to just being on their porch or in their car driving down the road and seeing woods on the shoulder and thinking that's all there is to it. There are huge uninhabited tracts of land in this country. And I saw a wonderful study about rainfall patterns and Bigfoot sightings, and how Bigfoot sightings, you can tell a lot of the real ones from the fake ones because real Bigfoot sightings tend to follow the annual rainfalls of regions. Bigfoots go to where the water is because that's where the food is. And when a area goes into its dry season, Bigfoot moves out and moves on toward more water.
Well, I find it interesting. They use the electrical lines
as a highway.
It's like their highway. You know, because it's all cleared out. They can go through. There's no traffic, and they can travel a lot of distance, cover a lot of distance in a shorter amount of period of time. So.
Well, don't you think it'd be something kind of unique if, say, they were out on a training mission in the swamp and the Marines the new Marines ran into Bigfoot while they were out there?
You know, I've thought about stuff like that because I always wonder why haven't we found one yet? And you know, been able to bring it back or find a carcass or whatever. And the carcass, we know, you know, nature cleans up after itself. A carcass is not going to lay around over 7 days. You know, you have bugs and other animals that are going to devour it. So not finding a carcass isn't that big of a stretch, but maybe some bones or a live one run into with a military unit, like you said. But, they talk about the smell of the Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. Well, what if they don't always smell like that? What if, like, when they notice a person, it's a defense mechanism, like a skunk or a ferret or something like that, where they have a musk gland that causes them to really smell really bad all of a sudden?
Like a skunk ape.
Yeah, like a skunk ape. Now, I'm not saying they don't have a body odor, but maybe it's not as bad. Because, people talk about, I could smell him from a mile away. Well, that could be for a particular reason. It could be for breeding purposes, hunting purposes, whatever. But a military unit, say there's a team of Marine recon out there training in the Dismal Swamp, or the Everglades for that matter, and they run across a skunk ape. They could probably be within 5 feet of it and not know it. Because this creature has survived so long in this element that camouflage is natural to it. If it's not moving, things tend to just vanish into the background, especially when they're properly camouflaged, as my years of military service has taught me.
Oh, so you was in the military too?
Yes, I served in Iraq.
Oh, wow. I never got to go serve in wartime or anything like that. I was just a basic baker, and we come really close when Iraq had our men over there to going over there to snatch them back, but they gave them up at the last minute.
Yeah.
Which, the bakers, they don't usually head out on the first group anyway.
Yeah. Well, I was infantry, among other things.
So what, you were an Army or Marines?
U.S. Army Infantry.
U.S. Army Infantry.
I find it interesting when he was in Germany that there was really 2 sets of soldiers on the
I lived in the most awesome barracks. And if anyone hears this that's ever stationed in Germany someday, pray that you get stationed in Friedberg, Germany. That place is awesome. It was German World War II barracks converted to us after the war. And I was on CQ duty one night. For those that don't know, it's charge of quarters. Someone's got to man the phones at all hours. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, we heard a door slam, my CQ runner and I looked up and I saw this shadowy figure walking into the bathroom, and he was whistling and humming and singing a song. And I told my runner to go down there and tell him to be quiet, or he's going to have some pissed off soldiers to deal with. And the CQ runner ran down there, and he stopped at the doorway, and he walked in for a second, and he backed out real slow, and he ran back down to me, and he said, "I can hear him, but I can't see him. You're going to have to handle this one, Corporal." So our barracks evidently had 2 sets of soldiers, the living American soldiers and the deceased German soldiers that were still going about their duties.
Yeah.
And did your commanding officer try to convince anybody that the ghosts weren't real?
No. As a matter of fact, it was kind of a standing order to ignore it. Just unless something really serious happens, don't bother with it, because we're not gonna report all this stuff and make our whole unit look silly. But we did have something unusual happen during the height of some activity that was happening there. And I don't know if it was because of it or if the activity was because of the event. But one middle of the week, we had an 18-year-old private go up into the attic and hang himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was completely out of the blue. As far as we know, we never heard anything about him complaining or having any problems or problems at home. He just took his life. And, we had to go through briefings and classes, to have a grief counseling thing. But he did it in the attic, which was odd to me because I lived on the 4th floor and the attic door was next to my door. And the lock was busted, so you could go up and in it. It's supposed to be locked.
You think he would have woke you up busting the lock?
Yeah, well, I had been up in that attic quite a bit. I actually felt at home there because I always felt that there were spirits up in that attic, that I was never alone. And my friends and I would actually go up there and hang out and drink. And we would call us drinking spirits with the spirits. And so we were a unique set of guys, and we would go up and we would actually toast the spirits, but we would also toast other dead celebrities and dead relatives. I don't know why we did that. It's just something we did. We would go toast the fallen.
Well, going back to the subject of ghosts while I'm thinking about it, do you have any theories about poltergeist activity and you know, what causes it? Because we know it's supposed to be different from demonic and different from ghostly. We know that objects move, but, you know, there's been different theories about what makes the objects move.
Yeah, as far as poltergeist activity goes, we've never encountered anything in our investigations yet. I would love to be called out to a poltergeist haunting. But from what I've read and what I understand is there's usually some kind of it's usually a prepubescent or beginning pubescence teen female involved. And I don't know, you know, for sure, because, you know, and I want to stress that everything we talk about, there's
theoretical.
Yeah, it's all theoretical. There's really no hard evidence yet to back anything or much of anything up, but we're getting there. But I still kind of subscribe to the belief that it might be caused by a person who has, and I firmly believe that we all have some sort of psychic abilities or extrasensory perceptions. It's how much do you believe and how in tune you are with it as to how well it works. And, you know, mother's intuition is a prime example. It's easy to write stuff off as mother's intuition, but let's face it, they were part of the same body at one time, and there is still a link.
Well, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm just saying that the poltergeist thing is to me, it's the same type of thing where we have an energy that's unexplained and is manifesting and is actually moving objects. And from everything I've read and studied, it tends to be something that's from a human origin. Now, maybe we'll find out different. I haven't, like I said, encountered any poltergeist activity in our investigations. But I would be more than willing to go on one if we could.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I kind of had a little bit of a hidden agenda. One of my guests I've had on the show, Michael Clarkson, is a journalist, wrote the book Poltergeist Phenomenon, and this is exactly what he was talking about. He quoted many cases where police and, people like that, credible stature people that have been out and actually seen this stuff move. And every case that he quoted, there was always an adolescent, sometimes a boy, but more times than not a girl. It seemed more common amongst girls. Mm-hmm. He said that, cops have been scared by big refrigerators lifting 4 foot up off the ground and moving.
I would be pretty scared of seeing that too.
See, that wouldn't scare me at all.
I can't say I blame.
That wouldn't scare me at all because that's par for the course for what I grew up with. I would sit a glass down on the table and it would slide all the way to the end of the table.
Yeah. But a refrigerator moving.
Yeah, a refrigerator would take me back, but I just don't think unless it was thrown at me. If it was thrown at me, then it would scare me. But yeah. I've dealt with it too long. It don't scare me much anymore.
Well, what I have to wonder is if we on this side have got the ability, whether we know it or not, to produce this kind of phenomena, then maybe perhaps the beings on the other side of the veil can inflict the same phenomena into our reality while they're interacting with it.
Well, I want to temper that with, I talked about earlier that a lot of spirits have to gather energy just to manifest themselves. So if you have a spirit that is strong enough to lift a refrigerator or, slam a coffee table, lift a bed, then we might be looking at something other than just a regular ghost. Now, I think it's going to be fascinating someday when we find out that there's like 17 different types of ghosts and this many types of this and that. We're going to start to break these things. I've got a tickle in my throat. We're going to start to learn more and more as the years progress, and there's going to be someone on a team like ours somewhere that's going to make that breakthrough, and the first puzzle piece is going to fall in, and everything else is going to start to fall in line, and we're going to start finding some of these answers. And I think that when we do, we're going to start to realize that it was never anything we thought we understood. It's going to be so completely different. And I like to quote Einstein. I think it was Einstein, and I'm paraphrasing, when he said that things that we consider scientific laws now will be scoffed, ridiculed, and laughed at in 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm. Just like the world being flat.
Yeah, it's the same thing. The world used to be flat. It was the center of the universe, and our perceptions change as our intelligence base grows. And as we I was just saying, well, we're going to get to a point where we're no longer going to see the paranormal as something so mysterious and dark. It's going to, I hope and I believe that someday it's going to become the field that a lot of us wish it was.
Right.
Where it's going to be taken seriously, and we're going to begin to understand, and it's going to make sense. And once the pieces start to fall in place, and someone says, "Hey, it's starting to make sense," then other people will take notice, and more serious work will be done.
Mm-hmm.
But until those first few pieces start to fall into place, I unfortunately, science in a large part is going to continue to consider us a pseudoscience.
Yeah, that is true. I was just thinking that, in all honesty, it's very interesting, at least to me, how science can sit there and they can't tell us how everything works, but yet they can tell us how everything don't work. I mean, you'd need both pieces of the puzzle, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would agree.
So what's wrong with my car? It don't run, sir. Why? I don't know.
It seems to me it's kind of like making spaghetti without the sauce.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like we were talking earlier, that everything has some sort of scientific explanation. Whether we know and understand what those explanations are is just a matter of knowledge. We could have a breakthrough at any moment. People are constantly coming up with new equipment, new ideas, new theories, and you never know when the right one is going to just break down a lot of those barriers. I mean, look at the ghost box even. A lot of people aren't necessarily onto the ghost box, but we've used it, for about a year and a half now. And we've had some tremendous things that have happened that probably wouldn't have happened without it, and could not have happened if it was just a radio station.
Right.
We've had the F-bomb on there many times, which would not have happened on a radio station. Anytime there was one spirit named Carl in Bellbrook, Ohio, that just particularly did not like the female investigators and would say, "F you, bitch." Every time one of the women would speak. But when the men would speak, it'd say, "Shut up." Okay, so he knew the difference between when the women were speaking, but it would specifically call us names. And then, that would not have happened on the radio. We also, you were talking about questions earlier, what to ask. And we try to ask questions that are not going to be typically answered on the radio. Who's the last president you remember? Is one that Chris came up with. And one time we got Roosevelt. So we asked, Chris asked, well, Franklin or Theodore? It said Teddy. So what are the chances of those responses in this day and age? Nobody's typically talking about Roosevelt except for us. Because we got a response on the radio show. On the radio station. But it was not something you would typically have on a radio station these days.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The numbers, if you say how many years ago did you die or what year were you born, numbers can be easily, manipulated, and they can be...
Numbers occur all the time on radio.
Yeah, exactly. You have WKRB.
You're tuning to 106.9.
You can have a lot of things come up, and if you ask questions that are more direct and specific, and there's less chance of them, being faked. So the other thing that's really interesting, people ask me all the time about that, is that there is a different frequency for the speech that is being spoken than it is for the verbal speech. It's on a different wavelength. It's much lower. It's very much smaller than what would be a typical voice pattern. So it's not one that you can emulate just by speaking. So you can just tell by the wavelengths. And sometimes those wavelengths actually go between the stations. So you'll hear the scan from one station to the next, but you may have the same voice go across 16 to 20 radio stations to say a sentence. And that would not happen scanning through about 15 or 20 radio stations.
Right.
So, plus it may be in between the stations. So, there's a lot of things that you cannot explain, but we're able to do now. that we couldn't do, 10 years ago.
I think for me it goes back to, well, I do a lot of study in hyperdimensional physics and quantum mechanics and stuff like that. I'm no genius or anything like that, but I do read enough or talk to people enough to get my own theories on, things here and there. And one of the things that keeps popping up to me, both in the ghost world as well as biblically, is the difference between matter and antimatter, spirit and energy, or matter and energy. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
Quantum mechanics now will tell you that even matter is made up of energy that's condensed or, at a slower vibration. So it kind of tends to make you wonder, is everything, like they said in the Kabbalion, everything mental, in other words?
Well, they actually, there was a doctor back in the 20s or 30s when there was a tuberculosis outbreak, and he actually created a special scale that he went to a tuberculosis clinic and could actually measure. It was like 0.17 grams or something. It was a specific amount.
21 grams.
21 grams. That's what it was.
Photographic memory.
That every single time someone would pass away, there was 21 grams that
roughly would vanish from the body.
That would vanish from the body that he could not account for. So if your spirit has some sort of mass, then that could explain what the difference is there.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that if you go back and read your Bible, how many people, when they were dying, was said to give up the ghost where not everybody else was said to give up the ghost? And was there a particular reason to specify giving up the ghost, and did it have to do with this mass you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess it's just a releasing. One of the things we say is that when the spirit, the reason why we can't see the spirit, our thoughts are, is that once it's released from the body, that it's not restricted by the body like we are now. So it can resonate at a different frequency than it does when it's in the body, if that makes sense. So that is probably the reason, very possibly the reason why you cannot see it like you can, because it's resonating at a totally different frequency. Just like, when you have infrared versus ultraviolet versus, regular visible light, they're all different, but it takes a special tool, a special camera to be able to see the different types of waves and different things that are in those wavelengths that you cannot see in visible light. And I think that that's the reason why you can see spirits in other wavelengths that you cannot see in the normal realm of possibility. And it also would explain why dogs and animals tend to have more of a sensitivity to that, because they can sense things in different wavelengths than we can. They're more sensitive to those things.
That makes a lot of sense, especially like when me and David Roundtree discussed it.
Yeah.
We're talking about different dimensions that overlap each other, bleeding through.
Uh-huh. Yeah, David's a friend of ours as well, and he's, we've talked several times about stuff like that. And
David's a very good friend of mine. I'm surprised we haven't met before. Because we seem to know a lot of the same people.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is, I've talked to him about even brainwaves and some things like that we have actually looked at getting into some neurological things and psychic abilities. So, we even think that there's something along with this wavelength with regard to psychic abilities, that certain people can utilize certain parts of their brains more. And he brought up a point, and you're talking about the negative versus the positive thing. Did you know, in fact, David Roundtree was one that told us about this, and I don't know the study in particular, but he said there was a study done, and that when there's somebody that is more of a negative person, like these serial killers and sociopaths that have something wrong with their mind, so that they cannot function the same way as what we would consider more normal average people, that they have an actual black hole in their minds, in the scans. There is actually a dark spot in their minds, in their brain activity.
This shows up on a CAT scan?
Yeah. And MRIs and things like that. And it's actually a spot in their brain that is not being utilized.
They call it a cold spot or a dark mass.
And
that's actually covered in our Paranormal Roundtable.
Yeah. And so that's one thing that we will be discussing with Christopher St. Booth and Philip Adrian Booth as well. And Scotty Rourke, I think, was one of the ones that brought it up over there, too. So, there's some actual mental things going on within people's minds, and people don't realize how much, is there. And I do think that psychics have a tendency to use a certain part of their brain, and we're learning more and more about that, but than other people.
Well, this little opening in their mind that you're referring to, could it be another, say, like dimension bleeding through inside their mind that's giving them influences that other people don't get that make them sociopaths?
Okay,
like maybe through this here dark spot you mentioned, they're receiving different information, mental bits of information that color their view of the world and make it different than the rest of us.
Yeah, well, basically that part of their brain affects their emotions and certain aspects of their mind that are typically functional in other people, but are not functional in them. So basically, people that are sociopaths and people that are psychopaths and stuff have a tendency to have different brain activity, than people that are average people. And the same way is this, and this is where we would like to get into with regard to psychics and see, okay, now we got the difference between that and what about psychics and seeing the difference in their brain activity versus average people that don't, have as spiritually awareness that they
Sounds very interesting to me. But while we're here, we got like 15 minutes left into the show here, and I always like to give everybody a chance to cover any ground I didn't think to cover or, that I didn't know to cover or something like that. Is there anything that y'all would like to bring up?
Well, we have some things coming up, like we had said at the beginning of the show. Next year we're going to be going to Morrison Lodge, and we're hoping to be able to get some stuff going on some Paracons and stuff as well. But our biggest thing right now is we're getting ready for the Paranormal Roundtable episode, and then also 2 more episodes of What Lies Beyond besides that. And so hopefully we'll be getting those, at least one of those before Christmas out.
Right.
And then, of course, they can always go to our YouTube channel at What Lies Beyond For You, and then our blog is whatliesbeyondforyou.blogspot.com. And they can also find us on Facebook under Research Institute of the Paranormal, as well as What Lies Beyond For You.
Also, I noticed on your website you got links to some of your other locations to, make it easy for everybody. And like you said, you got articles over there that are interesting to read. And I recommend to everybody that they go check out your site and, all the other locations you got involved with it. People are always wanting to learn more about these kind of topics, and I think it's a great way to do it.
Sure, and like Chris had mentioned earlier, we have 2 separate sets of blogs. His is more about his experiences, and so for people that have children or are going through this or have gone through something similar to what Chris has gone through in his life, they might be able to, glean some stuff from what he has said. And then my blog is more about the stuff that's happened to us since we met, and what we deal with now. So, we have 2 sets of blogs. We're probably way overdue on getting some new ones up, but we've definitely got some stuff up there, plenty to read.
Okay, now when y'all doing your Paranormal Roundtable, Is it just you and Chris, or do y'all have various other people like the Booth Brothers or Nick Redfern or somebody else involved in a discussion with you?
Yeah, what happened was we met the Booth Brothers the very first time we ever met them, and I was shaking a hand and saying hello, and he said, yeah, we'd love to be on your show. I said, okay, well, I knew you weren't an investigator. I wasn't going to ask. He said, yes, you were. We'll be on your show. So I went to, well, how can we use them? Because, they said they're not investigators. And I brainstormed on it a little bit, and I said, well, you know what? They have so much intelligence, so much to share. Let's just sit down and talk with them. Not do an investigation, but pick their brains. And then it grew from that, and I was like, well, let's have some psychics and some entertainers and some investigators and just on down the line. So we got this sampling of professionals from the field to sit around, and we talked about the impact of the entertainment industry on actual paranormal investigations and vice versa. Can they be reconciled to work together, or is this something that's just going to be continuing to pollute the field? And we talked about a great many topics, from psychics and investigations.
We had Scotty Rourke there. We had Natalie Poole there. We had Nick and Deb Lance. I don't know if you know them as well, but they're both psychically aware. And, we had several other people in the industry, Kat Klakow, and just had a great discussion. It was probably the best example of true paranormal unity I think I've ever experienced, where we all literally, we didn't judge each other on what we said. We just had a really good discussion and an honest one with each other.
See, that's what I kind of like to do, is I don't like to judge people. I guess you might have noticed that. And, I discuss a difference of opinion, but from my perspective, I'm nobody to say what's right or wrong, and neither is the guest in many of the situations, since there's so much stuff that's still unconfirmed.
Exactly.
That, it's theoretical, in other words.
Exactly. And we all have, maybe we have more experience than the typical average American, but that doesn't mean that we know all the answers, or any given person knows all the answers, Till we get the other side, I don't see that we are going to need it. We're going to know that,
I would tend to agree with you. One of my points on it is, it stifles learning when people start thinking they know more than other people. They start judging each other. The flow of information stops, the learning stops, and then progress stops.
Exactly. And, one of the things we like to do, another aspect of our show, is that we do like to work with other groups and try to find out different techniques that they might use. We've been able to learn some techniques that we hadn't previously thought of, or, we actually sit around and talk about these things.
Well, investigations differ from team to team and region to region. And it's just an attempt to see what works for some, what doesn't work for some. And it's a chance for a couple people, to show what their team can do and what different techniques they use.
There's also the fact that not everything works in the same one location to another location. I mean, you can take watermelons, you can grow them better in Hempstead than you can in, say, Waller or somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that may be related to geological, found formations in the area. It can be a lot of reasons. But,
like some areas are heavy in quartz, and that would enhance the energy pickup. That's just to give one idea. I'm just saying there's several things geologically that could, play a role. Water, quartz, who knows what else.
Exactly. Granite and, different things. Whereas a sandstone, which really is not, may not have the same effect. So, it just depends on the location, like you said.
Well, also wanted to ask both of you guys if y'all had any, last minute thoughts to share with everybody.
Just that, there are a couple of things, things that do just our little soapbox, if you will. While we have an opportunity, just a minor one, just be aware that, if you have a team and you're going into a location that if we don't act like we respect the locations that we have, that we visit, then it may ruin that opportunity for anybody else to be able to go to. And we've had several locations we would love to be a part of, but we can't simply because somebody has gone and screwed it up for everybody else. The other thing is that we really highly do not recommend people just going in and do the guerrilla tactics. We go in during the day.
Well, look, first and foremost, always get permission for any investigation you're going to do. You do not want to end your investigation in an ambulance or in handcuffs.
Exactly.
We recommend daytime walkthroughs to highlight any dangerous place. I can think of at least 2 occasions where this saved our team a disaster.
Yeah. Because
there was a staircase in a building we were investigating that you could not tell anything was wrong with, but if we would have tried to go up it, it would have come down.
Yeah. So unless you check out the place
Safety
when
first.
you can see, then you may not be able to get out of that place, without getting hurt, and that's not a good thing. But also, just get permissions. Don't trespass. It just makes everybody look bad. It hinders everybody, and they start creating all these laws and all this stuff against people, and it's
which is another danger you got out there, that people that are say either religious or scientific that have it out for people that are doing this kind of investigation could go out there and do some of the things you're talking about just to get the people a bad rep and hopefully cause them not to be invited in there in the first place, in other words.
Exactly. But, sometimes paranormal teams will go in and they'll do it too.
Yeah, I know. I've seen it on TV. There was a show called Paranormal Extreme, and the guy was in there saying, "Come on, scratch me," and that. Yeah. I'm like, you a glutton for punishment there or what?
Well, that and, people sometimes go in and they'll do rituals or whatever, and it'll cause damage, But then there's also the provoking thing that Chris was talking about earlier. You got to realize that this is not a joke. This is not something that's just for fun, and that there's no repercussions for what you do. If you're trying to get into, to where you're getting in touch with the spiritual realm, then there may be some repercussions from it, and you have to take whatever precautions you can. One thing we do is we will make sure we tell the spirits we do not want them following us. They are not welcome at our home. So you have to make them aware of that. Now, obviously, that may or may not work, but at least they know what our intentions are.
Right. And I've known people that's had spirits attached to them and follow them home, and they ended up with a lot of grief behind it. So, it does happen, and I'm with you. You really want to watch your P's and Q's. If you want to be funny, go do stand-up comedy. Don't do it when you're out there investigating.
Exactly. And then you take it seriously. You don't goof around. You don't, I'm not saying you don't have fun, but you don't, you don't take your safety, out
lightly.
of the equation. Yeah, exactly.
Don't take it lightly because it'll take you seriously.
Exactly, whether you want to or not.
Then you're weighing up an ER, you're wishing you hadn't, so, why wait till you're there?
Exactly.
So, I was going to say, why don't we go ahead and call this here a wrap? I've really enjoyed the show. Y'all are wonderful guests. And I'd like to extend an open door invitation for y'all to come back in the future, for us to stay in touch.
Sure, of course. Well, you've got our information and connected on Facebook and everything, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Chris, I hope you feel the same way.
Yes.
Just had to double check that one. But, and it's really been great. I want to thank all the listeners. I couldn't have my show without them. And, guys, I've got the website back up. Come join it. It's got groups, chat, forums, just about anything you could think of that you need in a social network. My idea of trying to give y'all a place to share information while giving you information from my show at the same time. As usual, everything here is free. The show is really ad-supported by the Google ads and the Amazon ads you see on book sales on the site. That way y'all don't have to, pay a site membership like some people do. Feel free to come over, join, and get in the chat room with us. And don't forget the website for the guest is www.whatliesbeyond4blogspot.com. And I hope you guys enjoy what's left of your Thanksgiving weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to add one thing real quick for
Sure.
those people on Facebook. We have something similar to that. What you were talking about, all they have to do is search for the Paranormal Billboard, and that's a place where they can post upcoming events, or they can actually ask questions or ask for help. So feel free to come in there and request entry to the group, the Paranormal Billboard, and it's a fellowship site for paranormal.
Right, and we have RIP/WLB group as well. So.
Yeah, that reminds me. I was going to post my show there with us earlier, and you two beat me to it.
Yeah, I try to get the word out.
All righty. Well, y'all have a great weekend, what's left of the weekend, and don't go gaining up too much weight on that leftover turkey.
Well, thank you very much.
We're tiny people.
I am too now.
Well, hope you have a wonderful time this weekend, too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.